Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our panelists, and good morning to all of you joining us on Facebook today and everywhere. Welcome to Girls Rock Science Weekend. We are very excited to bring you a special event today. Today, we are joining 5 brilliant female STEM professionals in a conversation about their inspirations, their experiences in the STEM workforce, and the advice they have for girls interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. We have a special thanks to our sponsors for this event today, the Verizon Foundation, Nova Chemicals, Hatch, and Wish 99.7 for making this event possible. But for now, I would love to introduce to you our amazing panelists today. So we have 5 professionals joining us. All right, so our panelists today here. First up, we have Dr. Carla Rosenfeld. Carla is the Assistant Curator of Earth Sciences in the section of Minerals and Earth Sciences at Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Carla is originally from New York State and did an undergraduate degree in chemistry at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, in Canada, and a master's degree at Duke University in North Carolina, and her PhD in soil science and biogeochemistry at Penn State. Carla worked as an environmental consultant between her master's and her PhD, and since her PhD, she has worked as a researcher in the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, the University of Minnesota Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences, and at Northwestern University before joining CMNH. So, good morning, Carla, and welcome. We're so glad to have you today. Next, we have Professor Rana Zucker. She is the assistant professor at the Rango School of Health Sciences and Engineering at Duquesne University. She joined the Department of Engineering at Duquesne as an assistant professor in August in 2019. Prior to that, she obtained her PhD in mechanical engineering at Pitt and conducted successful postdoctoral research within the biomedical engineering field at the University of Texas at Austin. She's using computer models to improve the design of medical devices to enhance their performance on a patient-specific basis. So good morning, Rana. Thank you for joining us. We also have Dr. Bonnie McGill, Ecosystem Ecologist and Science Communication Fellow at Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Bonnie grew up in Indiana County, PA. She majored in biology at Washington and Jefferson College in Washington, Pennsylvania, worked as an ecology lab manager at Duke University in North Carolina for 5 years before attending Michigan State University for her PhD in ecology. Her research interests are in climate change and how it's impacting farming, and how farming impacts climate change and water resources. In her current role at CMNH, she translates climate science into locally relevant resources for rural Western Pennsylvania communities, where it's hard to talk about climate change. Talking about climate change is the first step toward doing something about it. Thank you for joining us today, Bonnie.
Hi.
Next, we have Lindsey Holland, the Senior Technical Program Manager at Argo AI. Lindsey currently leads sensor hardware teams at Argo, building the eyes and ears of the self-driving car system. Other fun projects Lindsey has worked on include leading teams at Apple to build the Face ID system for iPhones and iPads, the system that unlocks your phone with your face, as well as building rockets that launch astronauts into space and can fly themselves back to Earth with SpaceX. It's pretty awesome. So thank you for joining us, Lindsey. We're excited to have you.
Hi, good morning. Excited to be here.
Lastly, we have Sandra DeVincent Wolfe, Dr. Sandra DeVincent Wolfe, Senior Director of Research Partnerships at the College of Engineering. And she's responsible for facilitating research partnerships and the growth of new initiatives, centers, and institutes, and industrial consortia across the College of Engineering, especially as they apply to materials and manufacturing. She's also the executive director of the CMU Next Manufacturing Center for Additive Manufacturing Research and Education, where she leads the activities and partnerships of the center. She's also the executive director of the CMU Manufacturing Futures Initiative, where she works to identify, connect, leverage, and accelerate research in manufacturing across campus to support innovation that will accelerate the path of discovery and commercialization to increase U.S. competitiveness and drive economic development in the Pittsburgh region. So welcome, Dr. Sandra de Vincent Wolfe. So we're so excited to have everyone here today, and especially highlighting women in STEM, right? So this is a very important thing to us here at the Science Center, and it's something that has far reach. So what I'd like to do is just kind of get an idea from all of you. What inspired you to pursue your career? How did you find out where you were going to end up where you are today? Let's start with Dr. Carla Rosenfeld. Let's start with Carla. What inspired you to find your career?
Yeah, I actually don't think I had any single thing that pushed me in this direction. I did like science when I was growing up, and I would do some science workshops or things. There was often some at my local community college, which was helpful, but I was also interested in other subjects. I was also athletic. I liked to be outside. And I think one thing that has helped me reach where I ended up in science is that I would try things, and if they didn't suit me or my interests, I would potentially go and try something else. And so I always liked science. I actually didn't think I would study science in college, but I went to college thinking I would study social sciences or humanities. I wasn't as interested in that, so I went and I changed my major, and I started majoring in chemistry. And then through that, I've always liked lab work. I like the active participation in science much more. I didn't always love all science classes because it was a lot of fact memorizing and things like that. But getting to actually do science and think about it in a more participatory way was really helpful for me. And so then I've just sort of meandered through trying to connect things that I'm interested in. I was interested in environmental issues, and so I wanted to find a way to connect chemistry and environmental issues, and found myself doing research throughout that. And that's sort of how I've made my way to the museum.
Very cool. I find that a lot in the museum world is kind of, you don't necessarily set out for it, but it finds you.
It does. Museums are a cool place to do research, and not one that many people know actually do much actual current research.
So as someone else who works in the Museum of Natural History, Bonnie, if you could also, so let us know, how did you find yourself in your current position?
Yeah, I think it kind of like building on what Carla was saying, like it kind of can seem like people in the positions like us panelists, like we knew since we were 5 years old, and maybe it was for some people, but actually at the time it just felt kind of chaotic, and it just sort of worked out this way. But it wasn't until like 11th grade. So I thought I was going to be an artist, a graphic designer. And then I took an environmental science type of class, and I just like cared so much about what I was learning about. And so then I ended up majoring in biology, like out of nowhere in college, and loved it. And then learned that like everything needs water. So then I focused on water, and I didn't really have a role model until later in college, when I met another woman scientist who then kind of became that for me.
That's awesome. So Rana, I'd love to pick your brain as well, because you do help us out here at the Science Center too. But what led you to find yourself in the career that you're in?
Well, for me, I think the thing was from the beginning, from when I was a child, I always had lots of questions, that it made my parents tired of me too. They were like, why you have lots of these questions? And I feel like to find the answer to my own questions, I need to learn more and learn more and learn more. I was very good in teaching, even at the time that I was kid as well. So at the beginning, I felt like probably being a teacher is good for me. But once I got my PhD, I really decided that I want to become a professor at university. And since I was good at math, maybe that was the reason that I decided to choose this path. But as previous panelists said, it was not really an exact moment that I decided this is a career I'm going to choose. But one thing, and then the second thing, and then the third thing, at the end, I found myself here. And at the time, I'm very happy with the situation.
That's great. So Lindsey, how did you find yourself working for Argo and helping cars figure out how to drive themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was maybe in middle school and high school, the idea of self-driving cars didn't exist. So there's no way that as a kid, I could have known that I would have ended up working on self-driving vehicles. When I was younger, I was definitely into science. I loved playing with telescopes and learning about all of the different kinds of dinosaurs. But kind of in middle school and high school, that turned into participating in science clubs, making other friends who are also into science. So building bridges, building model rockets, competing, and then having some success in competition told me that, I probably could be successful in this kind of field. So went to college, loved rockets, studied aerospace engineering, made rockets as my actual career right after college. But that first career kind of opened the door to all the different technologies that are out there, not just rockets, not just turning my model rockets at home into bigger rockets, but there are other projects that I can work on, other really cool technology that I can help build. So really being hands-on, building cool projects, that's what inspired me to get into self-driving cars. It was the coolest technology that I could get my hands on.
That is fascinating. I mean, to go from building rockets to self-driving cars, it is very, very much the future, it seems. So that's awesome. Sandra, if you would also be willing to let us know, how did you find yourself? Because you have done a lot of different kinds of things, but they seem to have led you down a certain path. So how did you find yourself following that path?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. And I have to tell you that when I graduated from college 30 years ago, I would have never, ever guessed that I would be where I am today. I started off with love and affinity for math and chemistry and physics. And when I was in high school, I debated whether or not I wanted to go to college to major in those topics, or possibly to pursue engineering. And since I've always been someone who likes to solve problems and who likes to build things, make things, I figured probably engineering. And to be honest, I had not been exposed to much in the way of engineering when I was in school, and I don't come from a family background in that area either. So I was aware of the traditional engineering fields like chemical, mechanical, civil, and electrical. And it wasn't actually until a college fair that my mom and I had attended that I pretty much accidentally found out about materials engineering, which is what I chose to study and what I do today. And that was a happy accident. It's a field of engineering that is all about the solid state. It's all about chemistry and physics and math and the types of science, physical sciences that I prefer. So I went to school, pursued that. I did a co-op program while I was in college and thoroughly enjoyed my first sort of research assignment. I worked for one of the Army research labs and developed a welding process for a new aluminum material for the Army for their M1A1 tanks. And that sent me back to school even more excited about working in metals, and made actually the learning process after that even easier because I had some reality to relate it to. I ended up loving that so much that I decided I had to go to grad school to learn more, because I was like, oh my gosh, I only have 1 year left. I'll never learn all there is to know about metals and this class of materials that I was falling in love with. And so I went to graduate school, and I was fortunate enough to be win a NASA fellowship to support me through that, and then to work at NASA while I was there. And I will be completely honest with you and tell you that for the 5 years that I spent with NASA, I thought I would spend the rest of my life with NASA. I loved working in the lab. I really thought, this is it for me. I'm developing new materials. I'm doing all this testing and characterization. Things I'm making are going to go on hypersonic vehicles. They're going to go up in space. And you just never know what's going to happen next. And I got literally headhunted by an organization to move here to Pittsburgh. And this is how I landed in Pittsburgh 26 years ago. And it was to come be the manager of R&D or research and development at a small manufacturing company that was basically making the composites that I was working on at NASA. And at the age of 26 and having the opportunity to become a manager of R&D in a small manufacturing company, I jumped at the chance and we moved here then. And that was a number of jobs ago. And I've had, different things happen. That company didn't do as well as it needed to. And so when it closed, I moved on to work for the Naval Nuclear Program, and I characterized materials and did troubleshooting for them. And all along in the background, and this is really what kind of led me to where I am today, all along in the background, I was doing volunteer work in the STEM fields. So ever since I was in graduate school, I have been a big fan of STEM outreach programs, judging science fairs, doing programs for high school students, special programs for girls in science, meeting with parents to talk to them about the science and engineering fields and how to support your children if they have interest in those and it doesn't happen to be your background, which is a significant number of people, my sister and others included. And then I took a turn down into the nonprofit world, and I went to go work for a materials society that literally promoted science, material science and engineering. We worked in Washington, D.C. to promote funding for research. We ran programs for women in science, for students in science. We actually have a museum exhibit that's all about materials and whatnot. And I will say my position at Carnegie Mellon, and I've been there 5 years now, is basically a collection of all of that. Like everything I've ever done, whether it's been in research, developing new materials, mentoring students, meeting with companies, meeting with government people to support research, comes into what I'm doing today. So it all makes sense now, but I will tell you, and as advice to anyone out there, you never know. You just never know, because I kid you not, when I was at NASA in the early 90s, I thought I would still be at NASA today. And I'm sure I would have loved it if I did. It just didn't work out that way.
I mean, that seems to be a common thread between kind of what all of you said is, there's not necessarily one path you choose at the very beginning and it's a straight line. And I feel like there's also a lot of stress put on, young people to figure out exactly what they want to do right away. So it's always really interesting to hear the stories of how different people find themselves in different ways, and you don't necessarily have that plan from the beginning. And there's a lot of different things you can do, just choosing something that you're interested in and seeing where it takes you. And obviously it has taken you all to some pretty amazing places.
Marissa, if I could add to that, just one quick thing, because this is to play on that, and it's almost amusing to me now. One of the sort of sideways decisions I made in my career when I was working for the Nuclear Navy, I got asked to take an internal transfer out of the materials group into a project management position that was kind of mechanical engineering. And I kid you not, I took like 6 months to make that decision, because it was so stressful to the idea of doing something that wasn't materials engineering, like taking a step in that direction. I was so afraid I would never get back, so afraid I wouldn't love it. And today I can't believe I made such a big deal out of taking that step, like it was going to be permanent and the last step I was ever going to make in my career. And so, looking back on it, it's just almost hilarious that it was such a big deal, when in reality, it's really not. And you can always change if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And I can see that where that would be very stressful. It's a big change, but you kind of rely on your own body of knowledge to take you through to the next step. So that is it's just a cool way to see the journey that you have taken. So I kind of wanted to also talk about like that journey and how you found yourself where you are. But particularly, are there any like big challenges that you have had to overcome in getting where you are? Things that maybe were kind of a roadblock or unexpected things. Does anyone have anything like that that they want to?
I do. If I
Rana,
can,
yeah.
I can probably start. So for me, probably is a bit different because I moved to US when I was 24 for graduate school, and that was a big shock to me. Like the language was different, the culture was different. I couldn't understand how to talk to people, and I just came by myself without the family. So it was such a big thing. Now looking back, I'm very proud of the moment that I made the decision, but still, I don't think if I get back, I can do that again because that was so hard at the time. But what I want to say is, although probably some of these things might look hard, I really think if you feel like this is what is good for your future, and if that's something that you have to do, you have to take the risk, and you shouldn't get the no for answer. You shouldn't let like the country you are in or the financial situation or any problem hold you back. And I learned that from my experience because a few years was so hard and it took me some time to learn the language and get familiar with the culture. But eventually it will work and you will be happy that you went through that situation and that problems.
Fascinating. Yeah. And Bonnie, I saw you raise your hand too.
Yeah, thanks. And so for me, I come from a working class family. We lived in a rural area. You know, where you live, you go to that school district, and so we didn't have like, you know, the most stellar programs, and like I couldn't afford to go out to college like out of state and all these kinds of things. But actually, I think that I also gained a lot. My mom's a high school graduate. My dad has a bachelor's degree in art, and he runs his own business building signs. So he manufactures and builds these big signs and then goes out and like digs these big holes to put them in, and there's welding and all these cool things going on. And so growing up, seeing both of my parents doing like physical hard labor, you know, late at night, you know, or working with them in the garden or those kinds of things, it really helped me understand that people who, you know, live that like us, and connect with people now whenever I'm working in rural areas, people who are in working class situations. So so there are challenges for sure, but there also can be kind of gifts from those challenges.
Yeah, similar experience to Bonnie's. I grew up in rural Kansas, unincorporated Franklin County, Kansas. There's only one school that you can drive to, and that school really placed an emphasis on, you know, boys' sports as probably being the most important place to fund. So a science club, having the money for materials for science experiments, for textbooks, for building materials for, you know, the rockets and bridges that I enjoyed making, that was non-existent, and it was not something that you could ask for and go get. So I guess it was kind of a turning point, you know, even that early in my life, where you can either take no for an answer and then go work with what you know have available, or you don't take no for an answer and you go make the opportunity. So I went out in the community. I put together a business pitch proposal to go around to local companies, asking them to sponsor a science club at the high school. So a lot of these people were already boosters of the football team, the basketball team, and I was asking them to donate even more money, which they probably, you know, didn't really want to. And I got no a lot around the community. You know, no, we just aren't going to sponsor the science club. But it only took one person to say yes. So if I gave 20, 30 different business proposals and got no 29 times, it only took that one person saying yes to open the door to make that opportunity a reality. And I think that was pretty formative of the opportunities that you have in front of you aren't the only opportunities. You can go out and make opportunities. and you can move those roadblocks on your own, even if you're a young person. You have that power, and actually, the adults in your community are going to be super impressed by somebody reaching out and asking for what they want and not just taking what they're given.
Yeah, that's a really great point in that, you kind of have to force your own way sometimes, but it's always amazing to see what can be made out of that. And oftentimes it's things that people, haven't even thought of before. So kind of paving that path for yourself is kind of an awesome story. So I wanted to talk about, we talk about STEM careers, and obviously it's the focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think a lot of times those fields tend to get put in a box of they're very like, you're in a white lab coat and you have a pencil behind your ear and that's all. But it is also a really big opportunity for a lot of creativity in the field. And in fact, creativity is a big requirement for a lot of these positions. So Carla, I was hoping you would be able to maybe give us some insights of different ways that you're able to be creative in your field.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think you're totally right. It's often the science or STEM is put in this box of non-creative. And I feel like actually I'm very creative in my job, in my day-to-day life, and in studying science. It's I come actually from a quite creative family. My sister studied film and works in film, and she and I often have similar experiences. One thing is that I get to make a lot of things, so I physically am building things, but I have to look at how to create that from nothing, right? And that's because I'm doing experiments and running experiments in a lab. I'm working with specific materials, but I have to make the experiment run well. And so I physically build equipment so that can happen. And then the other thing that I would say is very creative in my pursuits is that when you think about presenting concepts or ideas or data, you have to think about how to do that. And that often includes, graphic design or art or drawing, and thinking out of the box about how will people receive this information and understand this information, or how can I make it easier to grasp? So I actually find that is very challenging on the the counterpart to the analytical aspects of the job. It is both challenging, but I would say also extremely rewarding because it does push your brain in a way that maybe other things don't. So yeah, I think it's an extremely creative career to be in.
I'm curious to see, did any of you have like a particular example of where that creativity got to come into play? Maybe one of your favorite things that you got to do with the freedom of creativity in your field and kind of take things a little bit further.
So I can maybe comment on that. So for me, when I teach the classes and the classes are mathematics or physics, I try to bring demos and games to the class. And although I'm not teaching very small kids during the college, but I feel like it makes them more connected and engaged with what I'm doing. And especially because the topic is not a very interesting topic in general, like math. Many people, they don't like math that much. If you bring a game with that or some fun videos or just a fun picture, and I think about it sometimes overnight when I have a class the next day, that okay, what can I do that make them look at me and look at the slides that I have? I try to be more creative with teaching, as I feel like as a teacher you can touch the life of a student in a way that you really can't, like in a general way. So whenever I want to think about the methods for teaching, I try to do in a way that it's more engaging for students and I can touch their lives in a better way.
I have a different kind of example, Carissa. So while I have had a lot of similar experiences to Carla, in having the opportunities to create new material systems, design experiments, and create components and whatnot, and to design those types of things or to troubleshoot problems that you have with them requires an incredible amount of thinking and putting concepts together in order to come up with a creative solution. The other area Carla had also touched on that is absolutely critical to success, and this is a place where in the position I am, I have to be especially creative, and that is in communications. And it's not just in communicating science to the public, if you will, which I do a lot of. It does take quite a lot of practice and quite a skill set to be able to communicate very in-depth science and engineering concepts to children and to families and parents who are non-technical, or to your senators, or whoever you may be speaking to advocate for the STEM fields, but also even just in everyday jobs. So I'm the executive director of a number of manufacturing centers at CMU. I have an army of probably 100 faculty members and mostly graduate students who are part of these centers. And the same thing has always happened in my volunteer life as well. When you're leading a group or leading a committee, or whether it's a volunteer group or a work-related group, especially when they don't report to you. And this is how my scenario is, right? Even though I do have staff support and whatnot, the people I'm talking about do not report to me, not directly. But I create lots of programs and opportunities for them to get involved in. And I also do call on a lot of favors from time to time. I need a tour of this lab. We've got an Army general coming in. I need you to come in and talk about your research and things like that. You have to be very creative in how you make these asks, because people are getting, I know I get over 100 emails a day, right? And so if I'm going to be the one sending that email that's trying to say, okay, I'm putting together a day-long program, I need you to come and talk for 20 minutes about your research, I need you to give a tour, I need you to be part of this panel, you have to be able to communicate why it's important, what kind of impact it's going to have if they participate and are successful at it, and how they may also benefit from having participated in that. Maybe they join a center and they meet other people that they can collaborate with. Maybe they get the opportunity to talk in front of an industry, expert that might want to fund their research. Or if you're a student and you're giving a poster presentation, maybe this is like an informal job interview because you have a company attendee coming to see. But creativity and communication, I think, has always been there. But today, when everyone is just getting bombarded left and right with information, communications, too many emails, too many things, to pay attention to, you have to be able to be really creative in how you capture people's attention so that you can draw them to what it is you want to engage in.
That's a really interesting perspective. I mean, that's definitely true in a lot of ways. Just in general, people being bombarded with a lot of information. So that's definitely something important to keep in mind. Yes, Bonnie.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as others have said, communicating is really important, and I think more and more science is embracing storytelling as a way of communicating, because it's a very human thing. That's what we've done for thousands of years, is tell stories. And so turning like a very technical, result thing into an appropriate story for an audience requires a lot of creativity. But even thinking about creativity also as like, there's like this problem, and you imagine it's just this sort of like blob thing, that's in everyone's sort of imagination. You turn it around, and how do you see it? You see it this way, you see it this way, you see it this way, aha! And then you're like, what if we looked at it like this? What if we asked this question you're not asking before? And young people are especially great at that, because they haven't been indoctrinated with all of the, well, we can't do it that way, and this is the way we've always done it, and all these things. So then young people come in, they're like, why don't we just do this? And everybody's like, we never thought of that, but that's a great idea, So just another tidbit on creativity in science.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme too, is, not necessarily letting what it always has been be the guide. You have to kind of be able to see past that or be willing to accept those new ideas. So yeah, that's definitely very, very important. Lindsey, I'm really curious too about, because you were speaking about your time building rockets and now building or helping, self-driving cars. So I'm really interested to hear how kind of different creativity comes into play with those ideas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say throughout my career, I'm kind of an execution specialist. So a lot of times I'm taking the vision of, an executive, a director, and I'm executing on their vision. So you would think that there's not a lot of creativity in that because it is someone else's vision and I go implement it. But the power that I have is, and we've touched on it through a lot of the speakers today, is in the communication. So in engineering, in science, we make all of our decisions based on data. It's never just, your gut feeling. You always back it up with data. So data, though, doesn't always just make one clear decision. A lot of times there's trade-offs between one option and another option. And as somebody who execute on other people's visions, I might still have a very strong opinion about how we go execute and how we implement this. So I can use that data to tell the story of why I think we should go in one direction versus another direction. But it is all about having the data to tell a strong story, because if I just say it's what I want with no data, no one's going to listen to me. But if I put together a really clear picture and communicate my ideas, then I'm almost certainly going to get my way, especially, if I put together a convincing argument and have the data to back it up, really no one's going to argue with that. So I can guide the direction, maybe not what I'm building, but how I get there. I get to choose those steps on the way.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I kind of want to turn into talking about, as women in STEM, all of you here, women in STEM only make up about 28% of the STEM workforce. So only about 28% in those different fields. As a woman in STEM, how do you think your career in your field could benefit from having more women in the workforce?
I'll jump in here if you don't mind, Carissa.
Yes, please.
Actually, I wanted to build on something that Bonnie said, where that I think is really important and often somewhat overlooked, right? Where having different and diverse opinions is really helpful in pretty much all of our endeavors, right? So if you have different people coming from different backgrounds and different perspectives, this is women, but also all sorts of different diversity in who is thinking about the problems or the issues at hand, or how to build this rocket. Well, somebody may have a totally different perspective, and as a result, you end up with a stronger, more robust solution, right? You come up with new approaches that you wouldn't have come up with because you haven't had that experience. And so I think women are, an extremely important component. And not all women are the same. Lots of women have very different experiences in how they were brought up or what they're interested in. And so I think just gathering as many different opinions as you can when you're trying to approach a problem or a project or things like that only makes it better. Of course, with importance laid on being respectful of people and not necessarily using up people's time just for the sake of it, but incorporating diverse opinions is really important.
And I'd like to build on what Carla's saying, that it's not just different opinions, but if you only ever have people join your company or your research institution who maybe look like the same people who have always worked at that company or research institution, if you only bring talent from the exact same schools that you've always brought talent, you might end up getting just the same ideas that you've always had. And the only way we get those giant steps in technology and new ideas and coming up with these crazy ideas is to bring in new people from new backgrounds, from new places, who come with new ideas And that's that creativity factor. They're that spark that might help everyone else, maybe who's already there, have these new ideas as well. But you can't, I guess I see it as it's very hard to come up with like radically new ideas if we keep always doing things the same way we've always done them.
I want to add something quick too. It also, I guess it helps with inspiration for future people that they see us, like younger kids, when they see more women in this field, they feel like, okay, I can do that too. But if they see all men in these fields, they are not probably sure that who they should follow. So yeah, that's probably the third point.
Yeah, I'll add on to kind of how society structures how women are supposed to be, you know, like we're supposed to be nurturers, and that does come naturally to many women, but also to men. And so I've sort of translated that, instead of like, you know, how you usually use that, I kind of take that on, because in science now more and more there's an emphasis on like engaging with communities. And so being able to have empathy, like try to understand what other people are facing, like wanting to serve their needs and their interests, is something that women kind of comes naturally to women, but also to men. Yeah, and so, and like what Carla was saying, all kinds of diversity in the of who's represented just brings more opportunities, more solutions to the table. And as we're facing problems, you know, at a global scale, like climate change, we need to really because we need the solution to work for everyone and work with everyone. So we need to really have those ideas, those people at the table.
I would add to that too, Carissa, that it's not only important to have, diverse groups working on problems so that you have diverse ideas and solutions, but to play a little further on the idea of, if girls don't see themselves in certain roles, they may not think that they can do it. It doesn't happen all the time, but it often does happen that if you don't have an example, it just might not occur to you, or you might be discouraged from giving it a go. But that's true at every age and every step of your career. It is, I've been finding as I have gone through my career, it especially important for me to serve as a mentor to young women who are earlier in their careers, so that they, especially when you're in a career that is male dominant, so that you have someone you can go to for even the smallest of things, to bounce ideas off of, or to say, hey, I'm writing this email to my project team. Do you think it's too harsh? Do you think it's strong enough? Do you think it's, okay, these are examples of things that I have mentored students and postdocs and early career women on often. I think they also, at like any stage of your career, you need to be able to see that there's success in the next step, if that's something you want to go after, or that your organization supports success in the next step as well. But even if you don't need to talk to someone all the time, it's nice to know that there's someone there in the event that you need to sidestep and say, hey, I'm having trouble balancing this with this, or I'm not sure if I'm reading this right, or I'm going into this, meeting for the first time with a, set of executives or people you haven't met before, and, trying to navigate your way through that and trying to figure out how are you going to have a sufficient impact or presence in that activity, meeting, committee, job, if it's new to you, especially. And how do you navigate that, or how do you navigate the culture where you are so that you can be successful and have the best impact that you can?
Yeah, I love what you said about kind of inspiring others. And it doesn't even just have to be at a mentor-mentee relationship, because a lot of times, I mean, as we get further in our careers, there are fewer and fewer women above us, in those leadership roles to inspire us. So at least at my company, we have pretty good diversity, but obviously every company can do better. And we try to inspire each other more as peers. So every Friday we have a a meeting that's just for the women of my company, and it's just to inspire each other to say, you know what, you're doing awesome. Like, even if you don't feel like maybe you're doing awesome. So just kind of reaching out, whether it's at a mentor mentee or even just a peer level, to say like, I see you and I value you being here with me. That seems to really, that helps me get through every week as well.
I'll add one other thing to that. I think it's also, so I think things like that are fantastic. And I think it's also great to seek out community for yourself, right? And make sure that you feel supported. And not every organization, unfortunately, does provide great infrastructure for that kind of thing, but you can also go out, and I call on old friends from graduate school or new friends at my new organization, and try to make sure that I'm connecting with them to do those things. I guess more from a mentee perspective, right? That or a peer, just checking in with people is, for me, extremely helpful to make sure that, I'm in the right place, and other people have my back. So that is a nice thing from both perspectives.
I mean, that's a really important thing to draw attention to, and kind of building off of that. Speaking of, mentors and mentees and having someone to look up to, and as professionals who have been in your fields for a while now, what advice, I kind of want to hear from all of you on this one also, would you offer to girls who are interested in science and technology, or even what advice do you wish you had gotten when you were a teen or a preteen, looking into these fields maybe for the first time?
I can start us off. And I first want to say to Carla, my colleague at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, I got your back. Yeah. So what I would say is, I'll make it quick, is to, take up space. I think we as young women can kind of fall into this like, sorry, and you're just like, sorry for like being there. So just be like, I'm here, I'm supposed to be here. And like, I'm in the right place. And then to have like some self-affirmations. And so maybe if there are parents listening to this, you could turn these around as affirmations for your kids. So things like saying like, I have good ideas. My questions are important. And curiosity is cool. I think like I went through a time as a preteen and teen of being like, I really like learning and I like doing art, but I also am trying really hard to be cool. And like when I got to a place in college where I had a group of friends where like I could just be me, and that was awesome to them, I just was a lot happier. So be yourself.
I love that. Rana, do you have anything to add? What maybe some advice that you wish you had gotten, or advice that you think you would pass on to young girls today?
Sure. Like the problem with advice is sometimes that works just once you've been through that. So maybe if I say some stuff right now, they feel like, okay, it doesn't make sense why you say that. But once you go through that, it feels more sense. To me, one advice might be never give up. It gets hard. Once you figure out what you want to do, follow that path. But make sure, at some point it gets hard and you probably feel like it might not be for me. If it's not, then change it. But expect the hardness and don't give up if it gets hard. And the second one, be fine with being different. It's okay to be different in some situations, and don't feel like you are in a wrong place. If not all people, they look like you. That's still fine. And yeah, I'm ending it here.
Yeah, I think the belonging and maybe feeling like you don't belong, I think early in my career and probably in school as well, if I felt like I didn't belong, I got very quiet and just would try to pretend like I knew exactly what I was doing. And the fake it until you feel it. But I would actually offer the opposite advice now, that being quiet doesn't make you belong. Asking the questions and, being communicative and asking for help, that's how you will belong, because you'll get over the, I'm uncomfortable and I don't belong here. Asking questions it's brave. It's braver than just being quiet and pretending that, you're comfortable where you are. So really just taking that brave step to ask questions, you'll feel like you do belong once you have those answers that you need.
I can throw in one thing that I think about STEM in general is sometimes people think that if you don't love every aspect of STEM, you shouldn't be in it, right? That you have to love chemistry and physics and biology and live and breathe those things in order to be a scientist. And having diverse interests, liking your English classes as much as your science classes, will make you a better scientist if that's what you want to be. And generally, I love aspects of science, and there are aspects of science that I just feel totally unfamiliar with, and like I don't understand at all, and they don't interest me necessarily, and that's okay. You don't have to love every aspect of everything. So I think that's something to remember, that you don't have to be into every single little thing of the whole field.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Carla. Don't take offense, any of you that are into biology, but like that is not my deal. I was all about the physical sciences. So that's earlier I had stated, it's math, physics, and chemistry for me. It's not biology. It's not the wet side of chemistry. It's none of that. I'm very much into the solid state and sort of the mechanical side of things. And now being able to lead a center that's dedicated to metal 3D printing, for me is just the coolest thing. I mean, who would have thought, in the I don't know where I am, middle of my career, late in my career, I don't know. It depends on how long I work. That I would be doing something brand new. It's a brand new field that just has been, skyrocketing in growth over the last 5 years. And it's sort of reinvigorated the field of metallurgy and material science and engineering. The one bit of advice I would give is to really look around. This was something that was extremely hard to do when I was a kid, because I'm pre-computer, pre-internet. And so the only way you ever found out about careers was to look in books, was to watch things on television or go to the library or, talk to people you knew. And like a number of you, I come from a blue collar background. We are hardworking, construction, creative people. That's why I know how to build things. That's why I have a tremendous work ethic. And I thank my parents and my grandparents for that. But it didn't really lend itself to much exposure to different options. And as I mentioned, I stumbled upon materials engineering totally by accident. But it doesn't have to be by accident today, right? So today you can search careers on blah. I like X, Y, and Z. What could I do? And now there are so many what are called interdisciplinary fields and careers. And these are areas that bring together multiple single fields. And so like the area I work in now is one of them. So additive manufacturing or 3D printing is an interdisciplinary field. It requires mechanical engineers, it requires materials engineers, it requires electrical engineers, it requires computer scientists, it requires all these different kinds of people, technicians and designers to all come together and work together. And so if there's an industry out there that you think is really cool or awesome, there's so many different ways to get into it, but you have so much access to information today that I think you could do a much easier job of finding something that will inspire you to be excited, that will at least help you make a decision about your first step, which is where should I go to college and what do I think I might want to major in. And I think today that there's so much more access that you have a greater opportunity to investigate this a little bit before you try to take your first step.
That is an excellent point. I mean, there is so much out there, and there's so many different ways now to to find it out, including, you know, discussions like this one. I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today and lending us your different perspectives and insights, learning a lot about how, you know, all these different backgrounds can come together and lead you to unexpected places and maybe down an unexpected career path. But, you know, keeping an open mind and having these diverse interests is a really important thing. So thank you all so much for joining us for our panel today. And thank you to all of our visitors for joining us for Girls Rock Science weekend. We thank you all so much. Have a great day.